welcome to episode 177 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Lydia Creech,
Andrew Swafford,
Nathan Smith.
In today's episode, we will be doing an extended, not super long, but decently
It'll
long
probably
look
run long.
at the top
Not that
movies
long.
of 2017. This is Cinematary's top 10 films of the year. We did a kind of aggregated list of all of the contributors and all the people who have appeared on the podcast for the most part, who sent in their top 10 list, and we came...
as well as people who have done writing for us.
Yes.
Who have not been on the podcast.
Contributors, podcast people, all that kind of good stuff. They all contributed their top 10 list, and we came together with an aggregated list of the top 10 films for Cinematary of 2017. And I'm sure we'll talk about it, but I feel like we all feel pretty solid about it. I don't know. Pretty good one.
Yeah.
There's some movies I don't like.
I have one quibble. Yeah,
That's fair. Well, that's, we'll get into it.
We'll get into it.
Let's start out with our number 10 pick. And Lydia, you have the pick for us.
Yeah, it's our only superhero movie that made the list. A bunch of them came out this year, and they're going to come out every year for forever. But our number 10 is Logan, directed by James Mangold, starring Hugh Jackman as the titular hero. I used titular right this time. This film picks up, I guess it's in the future, and Wolverine and Professor X are fugitives in Mexico. And I guess something bad has happened with X-Men. It turns out I haven't seen like a couple of films before this. So I don't know why.
I haven't seen any of them.
It's not at all related to like other things.
Yeah,
really,
it's
that
not
have
like in a
happened.
previous X-Men, something happened to him, and so it leads into this. Like, this is kind of its own.
Okay.
It's connected, but it's also its own kind of thing. It kind of leaves off a lot
great.
of the other movies.
I was able to follow along without knowing why they were in Mexico to begin with. But they find a little girl, her mother figure kind of gives her to Wolverine, and it turns out that she also has Wolverine's claw adamantium powers. And he has to come out of retirement because he's just, doing his Wolverine thing by himself, taking care of Professor X, and help this little girl get to Canada, I think. And this was really big on everyone's list because it's it's not grim dark like the Dark Knight trilogy, but it's a quote unquote more grown up, I guess, serious kind of X-Men. It's R-rated. It's the second highest R-rated movie this year, actually, after It. But everyone loved it because Wolverine got to be all violent and say fuckity fuck, and it was sad. I'm so sorry I'm not selling this to anybody. I liked it. It's
One of the best films of the year. He says fuckity fuck.
That's usually to be fair, that works, sometimes.
I think we need
That,
we need more films that are R-rated and adulty, because teenagers can go screw themselves. Adults have money too.
It would be nice if the box office was not
By
driven by
PG-13.
teenage boys all the time, right? So
Yeah.
let's keep that out.
People like this because it's like Westerny inflected too. I guess the director Mangold he directly references the "Ain't No More Guns in the Valley" speech from the Western Shane, which is a kind of serious-ish, sad Western. So they kind of parallel, I guess, themes of like being too old for it, not in a grumpy way, but like actually getting old way, which is very sad. And Wolverine's powers, like something's wrong. They don't work as well as they used to. Professor X is dealing with dementia, I guess, which is very dangerous because his mind powers. I'm sorry. I'm laughing. It's It's the comic
You're
book
selling
stuff.
this so much.
I'm gonna toss it off. I feel like I've explained the plot.
No. Yeah, no. You mentioned at the very beginning that this is the only comic book movie that we're talking about in this episode, and that makes the top 10 list. And I think it's been a pretty decently reviewed year for comic book movies, in terms of at least the critical consensus feeling pretty solid about the output, including Wonder Woman and Thor and Spider-Man and Guardians of the Galaxy. I think that it's been a pretty solid year for both the box office and critics with superhero movies. So I guess my question, because I believe everybody has seen this, why would Logan be the best representation of that genre in this list compared to those other movies that I mentioned?
I have a theory. And it's not actually a good representation, but because it's a closing of a chapter. Because, all the, Thor and Spider-Man, those are extended universe, Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff, and so they're kind of like pieces of a tapestry. But Logan very explicitly sets out to be like, okay, we're done with this now.
Well, my competing theory would be that this isn't really getting appreciation in the same way that The Return of the King got appreciation for being the end of that series. I think that this movie is just so standalone. Enough cannot be said about narrative cohesiveness in superhero cinema. This is the only superhero film I've seen in a really long time, maybe Wonder Woman accepted, that even though it has that inherited history with the character, because he's coming from so many iterations in the film series, as well as so many different so much history in the comic book world, but it tells a very clear story from beginning to middle to end, and you don't have to know anything else. It's just a movie. So many superhero films are just extended TV episodes, and this is a movie.
Yes. I also think it's not representative of superhero movies in that regard.
Yeah.
But that's why it made our top 10, maybe.
It's the only superhero film to ever make one of our top 10s.
I hope
not
it's
just
the
this year, but any year. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Unless I make one.
We should... Does anybody have anything else to say about Logan? Because we have something else to move into, if not.
No, I think we've covered it.
Okay, so Zach, as much as we have talked about, we're all satisfied with this list for the most part, Zach has taken it upon himself to make his own top 10 list that is markedly different from the Cinematary aggregate top 10. And he is going to walk through it, piecemeal as we go through this top 10. This is happening, Zach. I turn things over to you.
My number 10 movie of the year is Good Time. For number 8 we have a
number
tie.
9.
Well, yeah, we have a
tie.
We have a tie between 8. So 8 and 9 were at the same number whenever we were coming up with the listing. So the first one we're going to talk about is a pick for Nathan. Nathan, take it away.
Oh, we're doing mine first. Okay. So this was, I think, the highest ranked film in my personal top 10. Actually, no, that's not true. This was a film that was very high up on my list, higher than anybody else's list, I think, who submitted one. And it is a film that I talked about previously on the podcast that I had many nice things to say about, and it is Bertrand Bonello's thriller Nocturama. It is a French film about a group of young, frustrated people who are trying to figure out how they can kind of, strike back or make a statement in a world that has left them with little opportunity, with little resources, and in their sort of anger and rage, they end up committing a terrorist attack and detonating bombs across Paris. And after that, this very kind of thrilling opening chapter, it's these young people walking around the city, and you don't really know what's going on at first, and you're slowly, the pieces are coming together. After that, the rest of the film, I guess maybe like a half to 2/3, takes place entirely in a shopping mall where they have taken refuge and are trying to hide out until the coast is clear. But of course, I think kind of going into this movie, once you like know this, the setup and the premise, you know that it's probably not going to end well. So there's this sort of sense of doom that kind of hangs over the whole movie. And it is at one hand like very sad and very tragic, just because it is sort of a lot of the unfortunate inevitabilities of our often, almost always terrible world are kind of woven in. It's also, I think, really thrilling formally. It works really well as a very tightly constructed thriller. It's I mentioned it largely takes place in a mall, so there's a lot of kind of like sumptuous images to look at. And it has a lot of things to say about capitalism, about politics, although I think it's more there are a lot of people who I knew who disliked it or took issue with it because it's not really like saying something exact or coming across with a really like, this is the message of the movie, this is how you need to act in this world, this is what you need to do. It's not really giving you a playbook for action. It's more just kind of reflecting the frustrations that I know I feel and that I'm sure a lot of other people feel, where you see things that are going wrong in this world, you feel like you're losing options, but you don't really know how to affect change when the system is stacked against you. And I felt like that was kind of the feeling of a lot of 2017 for me, and this is the only movie really, or one of the few movies that really kind of dealt with that or mirrored those feelings in a way. So that's my spiel for it. I think everybody else saw it. I know I saw it with Lydia.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know Lydia was really the only other one of us who liked it a lot.
Really?
Zach, I've not heard your thoughts about Nocturama.
I watched it a while back because it's on Netflix for people who would want to check it out. I thought it was fine. I wasn't I was kind of excited about it going in, but it didn't work for me less because of the reason where it's not like giving you the message, but I don't know, it seemed to float through this whole space where these teenagers are at this mall and doing various things, kind of interacting with the different amenities that the mall has, and I don't know. I guess it just didn't click with me as much as I guess it did with you, Nathan, or you, Lydia. The whole act of them being in the mall and kind of that marriage between this this kind of terror group, but also this who are kind of rebellious to the system, but also this dependency and affection for things and capitalism and all that just didn't really resonate with me as much. But then it was kind of funny because we watched Dawn of the Dead a couple weeks after I watched this for the horror episode, and that's another movie. Granted, it's dealing with different things, but it still has like characters who are secluded in a mall for an extended period of time, and for some reason the interactions and them having to be in that space in that movie worked a lot more for me than this one. This one just was kind of flat for me. But I will
tell you that.
Okay.
I hadn't seen Dawn of the Dead before seeing this, and after seeing Dawn of the Dead, I feel like my appreciation for Nocturama lessened just like a little bit. I didn't have a 180 or anything, but I was kind of like, oh, this sort of has been done before, because I do think they're kind of addressing a lot of the same issues, and Bonello has made very well known his fondness for Romero and for Carpenter and that kind of school of genre filmmakers. But for me, this just kind of has this just had this energy to it where it's like, both you have these young people who are in this space and they're like in a very literal sense, they're like window shopping and trying on clothes, and it's sort of like mirrors how they're like trying to try on identities and figure themselves out. But at the same time, it's kind of like they want to do some kind of productive action and create some kind of systemic change, but it's just constipated on every level because they can't imagine an alternative. They're just like in this literal mall, which I guess is sort of an allegorical space where they can't really see beyond that. They can't think beyond that. They can't really think of a world beyond these material goods and beyond capitalism. Which at the end of the day, it's like that I don't know. I can understand critiques of it because it's like, well, if you tell us what we already feel, like, what can you do beyond that? But at the same time, just because it was like seeing myself a little bit in that, seeing that feeling. I mean, I haven't blown up a building or anything, and I probably never will. But it was at the same time like I felt something in that. And it's also just like a very, at least for maybe part of it was like the theatrical experience versus watching it on Netflix. It was just like so loud, and so like afterwards I felt like I couldn't even talk because it was so kind of emotionally devastating, even though, like I said, you sort of know what the end result is going to be at a certain point.
I did watch it on Netflix, which I think hampered the experience a little bit. And I had also seen Dawn of the Dead before watching this. And when I watched it, I didn't quite know what to think of it, but as time has gone on, I've kind of decided that I dislike it in a way. I mean, not with a passionate dislike, but there's kind of like a void for me with this movie. Like, it's taking all of these very pulpy genres, like the zombie film with Dawn of the Dead, and there's kind of like a heist film in there as well, and a movie about terrorism really lends itself towards very violent displays of action, and Nocturama is like sublimating all of that, like just taking away all of the pulpier tropes and conventions of those genres to create this very European art house aesthetic or genre in and of itself, if you will. And to me, like, just taking out all that stuff like took away the things that made those movies engaging, and kind of took away some of the teeth of the thematics too. Like, Bonello is going out of his way to not tell you why these people are doing this terrorist attack, what that attack actually was. And I can see, like, he's making some sort of he's doing that intentionally. He's making some sort of point and being kind of elusive or coy about it. But to me, it felt like there was this huge empty space in the middle of the movie, and I wanted it to be filled. But I like your theory, Nathan, that it's about people who are frustrated with the current system, but they don't know what to replace it with, which would make that void in the center of the narrative. That makes sense to me. I just didn't really enjoy watching the film.
Yeah, I totally understand it, because there is, I mean, even as someone who enjoyed it, I did kind of feel that sort of like, this sounds really pejorative, and I don't mean it in that way, but there is something that is a little bit hollow about it, which, and I mean, that's partially just, I think, the result of being a film that is so much about and so concerned with surfaces. But there is that. But for me, I feel like if it had been explained, if it had been made more specific, it may not have been the experience for me that it was. And I wonder how well this film will play to time, just because it was such a specific kind of like this moment in my life, in the world.
I don't know. I think it's about teenagers. And I mean, the teenagers are the ones that carry out the attack, but it's also, like, as a teenager, you don't really have any ideology. You just feel like you have to do something.
Yeah.
And
just rebellion for
rebellion's sake. Maybe it's not that pat, but like this urge to change the world somehow, but not knowing how to do it. And I think that's pretty timeless. So
let's move to Zach's number 9 film of the year.
My number 9 film of the year was when Ted Cruz liked a porn tweet on Twitter earlier this year.
That was a good moment.
Because
early cinema.
There was something truly just like gripping and cinematic about this deeply conservative bird-looking man liking
Zodiac killer looking man
liking a tweet of a I think it was a mom having sex with her daughter's boyfriend. That was nice.
While someone else watches.
Sure.
While somebody else watches.
I think-
because I feel like Ted sees himself in that watcher, because I think he wants to watch.
It's a Brian De Palma film.
It
Really.
is. That's my number 9.
I don't know if that's better though than his tweet about butter.
What?
What was
That's
this tweet
true.
about butter?
That's
You
good
haven't
too.
seen this? It's the classic Ted Cruz tweet where it's like him in front of a cow made of butter, and he's like, "Oh, one of my daughter's first word was butter. I'm sure she would love to see this."
Oh my gosh.
That was my favorite film of 2015 or whenever that tweet came out.
Yeah.
Andrew, you're up with number 8.
Do it. All right, so number 8 is Your Name by Makoto Shinkai, a movie that I also praised when it came out in the early part of the year. So Your Name, it's a very familiar body swap narrative. It's about a boy from Tokyo and a girl from rural Japan who find themselves swapping bodies every night when they go to sleep. The story takes that very familiar premise and takes some turns you might not expect, but those turns are not the point. The point is like how this movie is made, the animation style. This is an animated film, and I would say it is unequivocally the best animated film of the year. It is also the highest grossing anime film ever, beating Spirited Away. And a lot of anime films that make a lot of money are movies that are part of some sort of merchandising deal, or they're attached to a franchise, or they have this prestige of a studio behind them like Studio Ghibli. This is the highest grossing anime film because it's just a really, really good movie. It is just powerful storytelling, brought to life very beautifully by a filmmaker who has a vision. And Makoto Shinkai is often compared to Miyazaki, kind of unfairly. Their styles are completely different. The things that they are interested in are completely different. But what the comparison should tell you is that Shinkai is really good at what he does, like Miyazaki is. He has this like virtuosic skill at animation. He always has this eye for cosmic spectacles in his movies. He has these unbelievably detailed backgrounds that he just throws away at the drop of a hat with this music video style editing that this reaches these incredible like spiritual heights at times that remind me of Terrence Malick in a way. But crucially, Shinkai is not just technically dazzling. He is always very deeply emotional. His movies are kind of sappy, kind of sentimental. They feel very adolescent, kind of like Nocturama does, but adolescent in a great way. Like watching his movies make you feel that authentic feeling of being 15. He's just like tapping into a very emotionally charged teenage mindset in a way that's very pure-hearted, doesn't have any cynicism about it. And in doing so, he gets something very fundamental about people in general as well. He's very interested in space between people, emotional space, physical space, space and time. That also kind of reminds me of the filmmaker Wong Kar-wai that we've talked about a lot on the podcast. And Your Name is his most accessible movie. It's his most conventional movie, but those are not knocks against the film. This thing works incredibly well, and it really resonates with people for a reason. So if you have not seen the films of Makoto Shinkai, you should consider this your introduction. Watch Your Name. It's our number 8 movie of the year. Or number 9 tied, whatever you want to call it.
I like that.
Yeah.
Has anybody else seen Your Name? Who's here?
Yeah, I saw it. Andrew went and saw it again in theaters with me. It's very emotional. I don't have much more to add to that, Andrew.
Okay. Well, without further ado, Zach's number 8 movie of the year.
Amazing, guys. My number 8 film of the year is when Kim Min-hee is lying on the beach in On the Beach at Night Alone, the new Hong Sang-soo movie. Because really, that's how I felt like all years. I just wanted to go and lie on the beach and like the shot that he uses,
in the cold.
Yeah, but the shot that he uses to film it, there's like, you have the kind of the sand, you have her body laying in this parallel motion, and then you just kind of have the ocean coming up. That was really peaceful. I like that.
I think you're forgetting the most important shot in that movie, when she is cooking Spam.
That's good too.
I think that's the best moment. Also, I think we should really quick mention that On the Beach at Night Alone was 11 on our list, and I feel like we should have done a Cinematary executive order to put it in the top 10. We should have changed the Arabic number system so it could be number 10.
Well, we had a tie for
True.
8, so...
True.
Yeah, so keep that in mind, people, that right below Logan was On the Beach at Night Alone. But Zach's number 8 is not On the Beach at Night Alone. Your number 8 is Kim Min-hee lying on the beach.
No, it's just her lying on the beach. The movie itself didn't make the list, but her lying on the beach
Number
is
7.
Number 7, that's me. Number 7 is Columbus, which I know we've talked about a number of times so far on the podcast. It is written and directed by Koga Nada. It is his first film. This is his first feature film. He's coming from video essays for Sight and Sound and Criterion and a number of other sites. But the story of Columbus, it follows a Korean-born man who, played by John Cho, who comes to Columbus, Indiana, which is this architectural mecca for modernist architecture, when his father, who is an architecture professor, goes into a coma. And while he's in Columbus, he meets this young woman played by Haley Lu Richardson, who lives in the town and just recently graduated from high school. And she is living with her mother, who's a recovering addict, and working at a local library, but clearly has this passion for architecture and the architecture of Columbus, but is deciding to kind of forego moving on to college and etc. to stay with her mother and be at home. And this was one that I just really immediately became attached to and loved. I don't know. I'm gonna probably, if you've listened to the newsreel, this is just gonna be like a retread of that whole thing. But I love the quiet simplicity of this film. It's obvious that Koga Nada, of course, has a lot of influences from Ozu, because his screen name is Koga Nada, who wrote a number of screenplays for Ozu's movies. So that's kind of a dead giveaway. Not to mention, there's a scene where John Cho's character finds a white flappy hat in his hotel room, which is eerily reminiscent of the one that Ozu was famously photographed wearing a lot on set. But I think that this movie also really has this clearly articulated idea of kind of, rather than searching for meaning of kind of self on a more outward level, it's this dive into the mind that I found really really profound and really moving about the film. I think that it really kind of just seeps in and I don't know, it just kind of, it sticks with you for a long time. It's one that I keep kind of wanting to go back to again, but I also want to make sure that I don't know, I'm worried that maybe the experience won't be the same, that you're going to watch this movie again and it's not going to have that same impact that it did the first time I watched it. But at the same time, I know that there's still so many elements, from just the shot composition to the score by Hammock, that resonates through the whole thing, to just the deeply moving performances by Haley Lu Richardson and John Cho, as well as, and also Parker Posey, who pops up in a small role in the film. I think that there's just all of these elements that come together, and so while who knows, it could shift in terms of how much I like it on a second viewing, I know that there's just so much there that that was rich and powerful, and it's a film that I'm definitely going to still be thinking about past 2017 and on.
Nathan, you were not a huge fan of this movie when you watched it just earlier this week, I think. So any thoughts to share?
I don't want to take a big crap on it because it's a really, I think, pleasant movie, and it wasn't something where I was like, oh man, like I wish I didn't watch this, or I was waiting for it to be over. And I think that, like you said, Zach, I think the performances in it are really strong, especially Haley Lou Richardson, who I think is like, this is the first time I've seen her in a featured role, and I think that she does really exceptionally. But I just felt like it was a little rigid and a little sterile almost. I feel like I could count on one hand the number of times that Kogonada moves the camera in this movie. And I know that's, it's kind of an Ozu thing, but I don't know, it just felt like it needed to take a deep breath and like let some air in and just loosen up a little bit. And it also, I on one hand, I like how much it was kind of about architecture, both in narrative content and formally, and it does have sort of a nice sense of place. But at the same time, even though I know that Haley Lou Richardson's character knows all this stuff and was like this sort of tour guide kind of, it felt like it was confusing a genuine sense of place with just a list of facts about a place. And I really wanted to like it more than I did, but it just felt a little, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is right now that I haven't already used, but a little kind of just
stiff.
Closed. Yeah, a little stiff, a little closed off.
I disagree. This was really high on my list. It was like my number 3. To me, it did feel like a very deep breath of air. Obviously the camera work is very steady and calm, but it didn't feel to me like it was, wearing a buttoned up tux or anything like that.
I guess the thing for me is like you watch Kogonada's video essays and it's like exactly the same style, and I just feel like maybe that works better for like 2 minutes than a full feature of like single point perspective over and over and over again.
Maybe.
Sorry.
I think people's mileage is going to vary on that. To me, the movie was very enjoyable, very pleasant, like you said, but also like it made me feel things. This is a really emotional movie for me, anyways. And you mentioned like it kind of feeling like a list of facts, but I mean, there's a part of the movie where two characters talk about the difference between listing off facts about art and like feeling art. And when I watched this, I really felt like I felt the movie in a way that I don't often feel. And there in that moment when the character begins to describe how the art makes them feel, the camera moves inside of a window so that you can't hear what that person is saying, and you just hear like the swell of the music instead. And for me, that is kind of meant to indicate that like in a way that like your feeling with a piece of art or your experience of a piece of art, it goes beyond words in a way. Like for me, Columbus is a movie that's kind of hard to talk about because it's just like felt it in my bones. But I do think that because it is such an odd piece of film, not everybody is going to have that same experience. I totally get that.
Yeah.
Zach?
No, I agree with that. I think it's one of those that's just, I don't know. I encourage people to go see it, but at the same time, like I can't. I think it's difficult to, put into words like, oh, this is what worked for, necessarily worked for me with this movie, because I think that it's just kind of. The thing I love, one of the things I loved about it, and I mentioned it before, was the score from Hammock, because it kind of just has this kind of reverberating feeling. Like that's kind of how I felt in terms of what the movie was doing. It just kind of was reverberating throughout, through me, and That's
We
just
sound very like cheesy new agey right now, but it comes from a genuine place.
Yeah, I know.
Zach, what was your number 7 movie of the year?
My number 7 movie of the year was in the television series Legion, when Aubrey Plaza is dancing, and it's this one sequence where her character is interacting with another character, but then it has a needle drop. It cuts to this she changes costumes, and 2, it goes to this red kind of kind of dark neon lighting, and then she starts dancing to this rendition of what's the song? It's kind of a big band song. I don't know. It's go in YouTube or something. It's pretty wonderful. I really liked it. It just kind of like need more
Aubrey
of that.
Plaza dancing in Legion, the number 7 movie of the year. Aubrey Plaza, one of the year's MVPs.
Yeah, this isn't a TV podcast, guys. Come on.
Number 6. What's our number 6?
Number
7. Oh, 6, right.
No,
Sorry.
we're doing 6.
Number 6.
I messed up.
Number 6 is Baby Driver. Baby Driver is the latest from writer-director Edgar Wright, who, of course, made the Cornetto trilogy and Scott Pilgrim, among others. And this one stars Ansel Elgort and Lily James, and follows Elgort's character, who's a young getaway driver who finds himself taking part in a number of heists for a crime boss played by Kevin Spacey. But of course, the final heist, the last heist to end them all, goes awry, and he goes on the run from these different crime figures played by Jamie Foxx and John Hamm, among others. This is one I feel like I was kind of told to talk about this because nobody else put it on their list, and seemingly I guess was not a big enough fan about Baby Driver.
I enjoyed it.
Okay.
That was a fun movie.
Okay.
All right. But it's funny. I did really enjoy Baby Driver. I think that Edgar Wright has this style that I really enjoy, where I'm just kind of a sucker, and I get sucked into the way he edits and merges music and editing and pacing and all of these different elements of film together and into this kind of hodgepodge of insanity. I think that this is definitely much more in line with what he is. He's been kind of doing a little bit of in his films leading up to this point, where he has this marriage between song and action, and this one is very beholden to to that marriage, where he has fine-tuned these songs to pretty much go in line with everything in this movie and every sequence of this movie. But at the same time, I talked about it whenever we talked about this movie when it came out. I also kind of found it to not be my favorite movie of his. I felt like, while it was a still movie I liked and think it's good, if I was ranking his movies, I would probably put it last, just because I think it lacks a little bit of that of the emotional touch that I think you can find in his other films, especially his Cornetto trilogy films. And I think it also was, kind of lacking a little bit of work in its characters to kind of really win you over with them. I think that they're fine, and it's not like bad, and it's not a huge detriment, but at the same time, I think that there is something much more immediately not really likable, but enticing, hold your attention about his his lead characters before this, and I think that Ansel Elgort's fine, but he's definitely just this surrogate, and I think a lot of the characters feel like surrogates, and I think that you can have surrogate characters, but you got to have one who's going to be a real person, and I think it kind of it struggles to find that.
I recently heard somebody mention that this is Edgar Wright's first movie that he has written entirely himself, whereas the Cornetto trilogy movies were co-written with Simon Pegg. And I think that just encapsulates why the movie wasn't like pushed into my top 10 exactly. Like if it had that human touch in the script and with the characters, it would be among his best movies. But there's just something missing there. Like everybody's just a stock archetype. But with that being said, it's a really fun movie. Really, like you can kind of like tap your toe to it in a way. And I enjoyed it quite a lot. It's just not in my personal top 10. Nathan, you disliked this movie, right? So anything to add?
In the words that my friend and writer Cameron Austin Collins from The Ringer once used to describe Chris Pratt, I feel like Ansel Elgort is a charisma suck. And just like
disagree.
Watching him in this movie, I just was he just gets under my skin, and I don't know, I think like there are sequences in this movie that I was kind of into, but I also feel like Edgar Wright's editing style after a while gets a little predictable, just because it's like every sequence is cut to the beat of the song. So it's like once you know the beat of the song, you sort of know how it's going to go. And I also felt a little bit weird about the violence in the movie. Like there's a lot of kind of just like these random shards of violence that will just jut out and then kind of get completely glossed over with a sort of happy soul song. Like Jamie Foxx's character gets killed in a pretty gruesome way, and then it's just like, that's it.
He does.
And I mean, I don't, not every movie has to like reckon with the consequences of violence, but I was like, isn't this a little bit weird that this major character just got like stabbed / impaled with a giant pole, and like that's it. I
don't know. Kevin Spacey gets run over like 4 times by this car, and it's kind of cathartic for the year we had with him.
That's true. Maybe I just don't want to see Jamie Foxx die.
Jamie Foxx's character was very underdeveloped, though. That was one of the biggest crimes in the movie script, I thought. But still, I liked it again.
I think in the script it was just written in Jamie Foxx shows up and he's just going to do something.
Yeah.
I don't think they wrote anything for him.
Zach, what's your number 6 movie of the year?
Oh, wait, can I say really quickly that Baby Driver had one of my favorite, by which I mean one of the stupidest lines of dialogue in a movie this year.
Oh, gosh.
When they're like, he's Mozart in a go-kart. I just thought I just think that's so funny. And for some reason, I think of that line all the time. And also the scene where Ansel Elgort makes a beat. I was just like, God. Like that was.
I enjoyed that. It's by Kid Koala too. That's fun.
I just thought that was really funny.
I'm also noticing or realizing that Lydia has not said anything about Baby Driver. Do you have anything to add, Lydia?
It was just okay. I saw it the same weekend as I saw The Beguiled and Okja, and that's too much was happening, and I was like, nah.
I like it better than Okja, but. Zach, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is a pretty recent one. It came out a couple weeks ago, and it was in the Monday Night Football game between the Atlanta Falcons and the New Orleans Saints, where one of the wide receivers for the Atlanta Falcons, I guess, would not like go the correct direction, and Falcons quarterback Matt Ryan with a hot mic, let me add you, on national television, yelled, "Run the fucking route!" And it was amazing. It was incredible.
Oh my god.
That's my number 6 film of the year. Run the fucking route. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back after this short intermission in the episode.
Hi there, Cinematary listeners. This is your favorite Filipino podcaster, Jessica Carr, with an important message during this break in the show. Cinematary would like you to know that we surprisingly do not want your money, and we don't want to place ads in the show at this time. That's not why we do this. We do it because we enjoy each other's company, and we want to bring you our pure, unadulterated opinions on the world of cinema. However, there are a few things you can do to help out the show that we would greatly appreciate. Firstly, leave us a review on iTunes, preferably a positive one, because apparently this will help increase our podcast exposure. Secondly, send us a tweet at Cinematary, or better yet, send us an email at cinematary@yahoo.com so we can hear from you guys for a change. Maybe you can tell us where the money from Fargo is stashed, or maybe you don't think In the Mood for Love is the sexiest movie you've ever seen. Regardless, let us know your thoughts and we will read them out and respond to them on future episodes. Finally, please share the show with friends and members of your family who you think really enjoy listening to us and participating in our film discussions. We also have some cool merchandise that you can check out on the site. So to recap, review, send us your thoughts through Twitter and email, and share with your friends and family. We would truly appreciate it. Thank you for listening, and now back to the show.
We are back with part 2 of episode 177 of Cinematary. As we continue to count down our top 10 films of the year, we're going to be kicking this part off with number 5. Andrew, take it away.
Number 5 is Twin Peaks: The Return by David Lynch. I have a brief disclaimer at the beginning of this blurb, and it's not that this movie is actually a TV show. Like, fuck your feelings if you want to get into that argument. Like, it's on our top 10 list. My disclaimer is that this is number 5 on our list due to a technical error in the voting, because we had one voter who would have put it as their number 1 but did not, because they thought that this would wind up at number 1 no matter what. So thanks to that one voter, here we are at number 5 with Twin Peaks: The Return. This is by the now 71-year-old David Lynch, who has been the creator of some bizarre and macabre cinema pretty consistently since 1977 with his movie Eraserhead. He hasn't made a film in over 10 years, but this year he was given a huge canvas and unlimited creative freedom to make this massive thing that is Twin Peaks: The Return, whether you want to call it a movie or a TV show or whatever. For my money, this is the cinematic experience of 2017. It is a 18-hour odyssey back to that northwestern town he created in the 90s with his TV show Twin Peaks. David Lynch took his now iconic character, Special Agent Dale Cooper, and he splits his identity into about 2 or 3 parts, depending on how you want to count it. You have this part of him that's unequivocally evil. You have this part of him that's dopily pure-hearted. And then you have the real Cooper kind of hanging somewhere in the ether. Central conflict of the story is how these personalities are going to be reconciled for Cooper to return to Twin Peaks. The show does not really stay focused on that track, though. It is delightfully tangential, very scatterbrained, and it has many hours of Lynch just taking his time, enjoying the many pleasures to be had at the margins of Cooper's story. And since this was broadcast on television, it has that long episodic structure in a way. But unlike most television broadcasts, there's no familiar form or structure that might clue you in on what to expect from hour to hour. So just like he did with his films like Inland Empire and Mulholland Drive, he's creating his own mode of storytelling here. And watching it week to week, like even as a Lynch fan who's seen all of his movies, I had legitimately no idea what was going to happen next. But I always knew it would be immensely enjoyable or immensely thrilling or visually beautiful, like the now infamous Episode 8, which takes its cues from non-narrative avant-garde cinema to create this indescribable spectacle of light, the likes of which has never been broadcast on television in history. But it's this seemingly boundless creativity on display in Twin Peaks: The Return that is just so exciting as a movie fan. And having The Return to watch this summer was just this reassuring beacon of hope in a landscape of chaos that I don't think I or anybody was psychologically prepared for. And no matter what madness was happening in the world, I always knew that there was a new hour of David Lynch to watch at the end of the week. And there's just so much to say about this show, movie, whatever. So much critical writing, it's already been done. So much critical writing inevitably will be done on Twin Peaks: The Return. But my main takeaway is that I just fucking cherished watching the show this year more than anything else. Zach, I know you did not watch Twin Peaks: The Return. You've not seen Twin Peaks, but Nathan and Lydia, you guys are both big fans. So what else to add?
I'm going to say, as a kind of reluctant David Lynch fan, I got talked into watching Twin Peaks, and I didn't expect to wind up loving it as much as I did. I maybe don't have as much of an intelligent take, as there's a lot of, you already mentioned, really good critical analytical writing out there about it. But I think what was just really gratifying to me, and why it landed at number 1 on my personal top 10 list, even like David, I really appreciate how smart David Lynch is and how much he obviously deeply, deeply loves cinema. And that shows up in every episode, and also, he loves it, and he has a deep knowledge of the history, but he's also doing his own thing with it. And so that's what made it a movie to me, and was really delightful.
He uses digital effects in a way that kind of harkens back to the early primitive effects of silent cinema, and
yes.
George Milius and stuff like that. Like, he wants you to see the strings of it because of that historical love of cinema, like you said.
So that's what really put it at number 1 for me. Also, I love Dougie.
Doug, I dressed as Dougie for Halloween.
Made me so
also,
happy.
my cat is named Cooper. Nathan, what else?
I will say, I think you put it very well, Andrew, for the most part. Basically everything that I would say you have already said. I think that, there have been very few, in my short lifetime, very few new works of art where I've been like, wow, I'm really glad that I'm alive at this
absolutely.
time, in this moment, to be receiving this new thing and sort of stuck with the task of trying to figure it out. And I think regardless of however you want to classify it, and I think it's sort of, the conversation has been this very much like it's this or this, but I think it sort of exists beyond the words and the categories that we really have, just because there are moments that feel very much like television, that are this very, kind of, I think that the best description of the kind of moments that I'm speaking of were put by the writer and filmmaker Gina Teller-Rowley for a piece for Filmmaker magazine. She said that whereas the original Twin Peaks was this very kind of warm, very autumnal feeling product designed for cathode ray tube televisions, this is much more reflective of how our world is, because it's sort of like, as she put it, like a laptop screen turned up too bright. So on one hand, it has this very sort of non-cinematic quality, but then it has those, those effects you're talking about. It has these echoes of the avant-garde, and definitely the closest that television broadcast, something being broadcast on television has ever truly gotten to an avant-garde. So I feel like on one hand, it exists beyond, but no matter how you want to classify it, I think sort of the amazing thing about it is how it really just sort of, it was this communally experienced thing. Even if you were watching it by yourself, like I was a lot of the time, I was still looking forward to when I would run into somebody who was also watching it. And even if we didn't really say anything articulately, we were just we both got it. We were both just man, that's a thing that we saw. That isn't that crazy. Or, even as terrible as Twitter and the internet can be, sometimes even conversations that I would have there, or things that I would say people just say, even if there wasn't a lot of thought behind them, I was just wow, this is, making me consider what I just saw in a new way, or watching it with other people the few times I did, whether it was just with one or two other friends or whether it was at a party like I saw the series finale, it was definitely something that was experienced communally, maybe differently than the family gathered around the TV or, you know, going to a movie theater with a whole bunch of strangers. Like, it's a new communal experience, but it was a communal experience nonetheless. And I think regardless, again, of how you classify it, I think we care less about whether it's cinema or television. And I think the thing that we've been yearning for most of all in our sort of arguments about not just Twin Peaks, but about all these things that kind of confound our current categorizations are we want to break past this isolation, you know, because I think the negative things that people say about streaming or about whatever, it's that you're at home by yourself, and sometimes that's great. Sometimes you need that, but at the end of the day, I think we're all looking for something that we can talk about or process with other people and grow our connection with other people. And Twin Peaks definitely did that, as much of a sometimes very internal thing as it was.
Yeah, great, awesome takeaway. Like, something that we are grateful to be around during the critical conversation. What a time to be alive, as they say. Zach, really? What is your number 5?
I think Nathan put it really eloquently when he said that, you know, stuff you reflect on stuff and you kind of go, man, it's such a nice time to be alive. And that's kind of how I felt about my number 5 film, which was the Twitter feed of Cher. It's just such a joyous, open, sometimes rude against the Trumpian, you know, endeavors of his followers, but altogether genuine. Cher's Twitter feed, number 5.
Do you have a favorite tweet?
No, I really like how she just the whole thing. The whole thing is just something.
I just wonder if there's a taste for those of us who don't follow Cher, for us plebeians.
Just go follow Cher. That's all I can say.
I'm sold. It's the number 5 movie of the year.
Number 4, Lydia.
Right, number 4 came out very early in the year, but it came in high on like a lot of people's lists, and it's the directorial debut of Jordan Peele, Get Out. And I think the reason it scored so high, do I have to do the plot?
No.
People know the plot.
Okay, good. I think the reason it came out so high on a lot of people's lists was not only is it like really, really smart horror, like narrative filmmaking, but it's like also very popular and audience pleasing, and it's by voices that aren't typically represented, not just in horror but in cinema. And honest to God, it feels like the film of 2017, even though it wasn't my number 1 or whatever, but. And I rewatched it recently, and Andrew, you wrote on Letterboxd that rewatching Get Out is like seeing it for the first time, just because of the nature of the reveals and the twists. And I don't know how to describe this. Like, you watch it the first time, and it's very sinister and menacing, and you don't know what's going on, and that's suspenseful and terrifying. But then you watch it again, and the way that it's sinister changes. It
is a completely new movie, and like both parts of it, both sides of it have equal importance, right? There's like the thrilling genre side the first time you watch it, and then there is all the stuff he was hiding from you the first time around.
And like the first time you watch it, you kind of like groan at the parents, and you're like, oh God, yeah, white liberals. But then the second time you watch it, you're like, oh God, white liberal.
It's a new set of thematics. I mean, it's still about white liberalism, but he is saying different things both times you have seen it,
so
right?
It's definitely worth watching twice.
Yes, if you have only seen Get Out once, you have not really seen Get Out. I think I would have put it much higher on my list had I rewatched it before I wrote my list for Arts Knoxville and I made my list for Cinematary. I put it at number 8, a tie for number 8 on my Arts Knoxville list, because I was able to do ties for them, and I wasn't able to do ties for Cinematary, so I didn't put it on there, and I really regret that decision. I think this would probably be like my number 3 or my number 4 if I could do my list again now.
Lists are so hard. I hate them. I'm glad that Get Out got on our list so high, because I know what you tied it with was Wonder Woman, which
didn't make the list.
Didn't make
sadly.
our list for Cinematary, but it's kind of
because it wasn't good.
It has a similar function and like really important, like a good, solid genre film by underrepresented voice, but Get Out's way smarter than Wonder Woman. Like, it's so smart.
The thing that has made me kind of... When Get Out first came out, me and Nathan talked about it on the podcast, and I said that I enjoyed it, but there were things that were holding me back from really loving it. Like, I could kind of see too many of the genre strings, the horror-comedy mix didn't really work for me. But
It works.
It works. It works so well. But as the year has gone on, the thing that has made me really reassess my initial response and think back on the movie and want to revisit it is like how much staying power it has in the cultural conversation. Like, the best horror movies are these like mythological symbols that we can use to like describe our world and describe like specific evils that exist in our world. And Get Out has like just entered society's vernacular. Like, we know what it means for somebody to be in the sunken place, like on a metaphorical level. Like, I've heard Omarosa described as being in the sunken place. I've heard Trevor Noah being described as being in the sunken place, right? And like, the fact that it is a horror movie that is like immediately like sunk its teeth into the way we talk to each other and like what we think of as like the big canonical scares of like our culture cinema, like shows that there's something about this movie that like resonates with us as a people, right? Like, it is and it's like damning a movie to say that it's important, but like Get Out feels like not just an important political statement, but it feels like this kind of watershed moment in horror cinema. Like, I'm almost certain this is going to be nominated for Best Picture, which doesn't really mean anything other than it would be the 3rd ever horror movie to be nominated for Best Picture after The Exorcist and Silence of the Lambs. Like, that only happens when a horror movie makes huge waves in society as a whole, not just among people who like horror movies. So I think this is like just a very like monumental thing to exist now. I liked it so much more the second time I watched it. Unequivocally, it's incredible. Other thoughts, Zach, Nathan? You haven't said much.
I don't really have a lot to say about it. I liked it and I think it's a good movie, but I think pretty much everything that I also, maybe I haven't, it's because I haven't seen it a second time yet. Maybe that second viewing, it will be like Edgar Wright once tweeted, inherent vice, more like inherent twice, because you need to see it 2 times. So maybe it's twice out. I don't know.
Well, I also want to say, it sounds like we're saying you have to watch it twice for it to be good, and generally that's a hard no on movies if you can't get it the first time. But I mean, Get Out gets it if you just see it once on genuine entertainment and just fun too.
Yeah. It was definitely one of the more entertaining experiences I had at a movie this year, but I haven't, like, it has not necessarily stood out to me as like a great movie. But maybe if I see it once more, it will achieve that status, because it sounds like that's kind of the experience that you have had, both of you. The difference between just a good, entertaining, fun movie and
one worth revisiting.
Yeah, exactly. Like masterpiece status.
It was a roller coaster to watch in the theater with the crowd. Like, I've not been in a theater with a more like vocally responsive crowd than I was with Get Out. And watching it again at home, just me and my wife, like, a lot of the cheer lines or a lot of the laugh lines weren't necessarily there, but they all played in a different way that was just as valid, right? Zach, anything else about Get Out before we go to your number 4?
No, I think I agree with your point, though, that watching it a second time, does add a layer to the movie, because I think that I got more out of it when I watched it the second time when it came out on DVD and Blu-ray or whatever.
And watch the alternate ending and all the deleted scenes too.
Yeah.
Those are really good. Zach, what's your number 4 movie of the year?
My number 4 movie of the year is one that came out on Netflix earlier during the summer. It is the trailer, not the movie, the trailer for Okja. Because if you watch the trailer for Okja,
I agree.
It's so emotional.
It's so emotional with the clips from the movie and the soundtrack by the Mamas and the Papas. Like, there's something getting to you there. I think that if only the actual movie was that good. That's all I'll say.
Yes, I watched the trailer for Okja and I cried, and then I watched it again and I cried again. And then the movie came out and I kind of hated it. Real talk, I kind of hated that movie.
That's my experience with Boyhood.
Ooh, I like Boyhood.
I think that's fair, Nathan.
Yeah, just interject. I'm just dunking on a lot of movies. I'm so sorry.
I think that's what our top 10's about, right?
Feathers.
Just putting down a lot of other
our top
movies.
10 of the year. Nobody likes them. Number 3. Well, Nathan, you're up with number 3.
I think number 3 is interesting because, Zach, did you have it in your top 10? I can't remember. You did, didn't you?
I had it number 2.
Okay. Yeah, the rest of us did not have it in their top 10. I liked it quite a bit, though, and this is the sort of not really directorial debut of Lady Bird, of Greta Gerwig. Why am I? Oh my! No, it is semi-autobiographical, but it is not Lady Bird's literal directorial debut because she is a fictional person. It is the somewhat sort of semi-directorial debut of Greta Gerwig. It's called Lady Bird, with Saoirse Ronan, Laurie Metcalf, Lucas Hedges, Timothée Chalamet. Great cast. The reason why I had all those qualifiers before directorial debut is because Greta Gerwig co-directed a film with Joe Swanberg in 2008 called Nights and Weekends, and she also co-wrote Frances Ha and Mistress America with her creative/life partner person, Noah Baumbach. And I think that the part of why people have liked Lady Bird so much is because it has this really strong, developed voice and sense of style to it, which, thinking back on those movies, on Frances Ha and Mistress America, it's very clear that like she had a huge role in kind of the style of those movies and in their voice and in their tone. This is about a high school senior named Lady Bird in Sacramento, California in the fall of 2002, spring of 2003. And she's going through, I mean, I'm sure as anyone who went through a senior year of high school knows, or was just a teenager ever, that's a very turbulent time in your life. And this movie is all about that. I think that one of the things about this movie that really speaks to its quality is sort of similar to something that you were saying about Get Out, Andrew, kind of in the way that The Sunken Place has really quickly been absorbed into the cultural consciousness. There is no like single line of dialogue or idea from this movie that has been absorbed quite on that level, but it's one of the few movies that is not like a franchise entry or something like that I have seen just like regular people being excited to go see or going to see very early in its release or even going to the theater to see. I've seen a lot of people who watch movies but maybe wouldn't consider themselves cinephiles, or people who actively watch movies who like saw it opening day, who saw it the weekend it came out, who've seen it multiple times at the theater since then. And I think it's that is just sort of important to take note of generally, but I also do think that the quality of the film definitely has something to do with that. I mean, like I said, you have a really fantastic ensemble cast, many of whom are younger actors, but who are very much in themselves and giving great performances. But it also is about a relationship that is not really often the focal point of a lot of more mainstream oriented cinema, even though this isn't necessarily like a big movie or anything, but it's largely about the relationship between a mother and a daughter, and is very honest, sometimes uncomfortably and brutally so, about those kinds of relationships. Just parents and children in general, but specifically mothers and daughters. Those relationships can, as you see in this movie, one moment be very loving and wonderful, and then the next moment be terrible. And so I think this is a movie that has struck a chord with a lot of people, but it also is just a very generous and warm movie. It has a very nice sense of color and texture. It's very funny. It speaks to, I am younger than the characters in this movie. I was like 8 in 2002. But if you were around in the 2000s, you kind of, it strikes a chord and captures a certain milieu without turning into like a nostalgia piece, like the movie that I dunked on previously, Boyhood. It definitely feels like somebody who was growing up in that time. It's not just like, here's a Justin Timberlake song because that's what people were listening to. It feels very genuine, and I think that's what people have been responding to, is how genuine it is, and how generous and warm it is. Like I already said, I keep using the same adjectives just over and over again, but isn't that what being a critic's all about? Just taking the same
film
words.
Criticism is sumptuous and genuine.
Sincere.
That's what it's about.
Yeah. I know. Everybody else liked this movie, right? If to varying degrees.
Lydia
yes.
didn't.
You didn't, Lydia?
Lydia didn't like it at all?
No. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't connect with it emotionally as it seems like what everyone is responding to is the central relationship between mother and daughter you mentioned, Nathan, and as I think I'm the only one here who has a mother-daughter relationship.
I don't know.
I didn't relate to it. And I don't know, it's not necessarily that it felt off or untrue, because being a teenage girl and your mom's always on your case, or you're not seeing eye to eye, it can be shitty. You're just a less warm person than Lady Bird and Greta Gerwig are. But it left me just pretty cold. Although I did think Kyle was hilarious, because definitely that's Timothy
Chalamet.
Chalamet's character.
Yeah, that's one of the things too. Like the Lucas Hedges character is like multiple guys I was in musical theater with in high school. It's like the closeted young Republican. And in fact, I thought it was very funny that in his first moment on screen, you see him singing There Are Giants in the Sky from Into the Woods, because the specific person I went to high school with, who he reminded me of, played that role in Into the Woods in high school and sang that very song. And I just like started fucking dying when I saw that. And I don't think anybody else really thought that was as funny as I did, but I thought it was. It is one of those things where it's just like there are definitely things I feel like that are like I know that even if the specific experience doesn't ring true, it's like there are things that you see. But I also think it's not just, at least for me, like the things I liked about it weren't just like relating. But I think there are some really like formally accomplished moments in it. Like there's a moment towards the end of the movie where in the space of a single cut, Lady Bird like transforms into her mother, and then it cuts back to Lady Bird, and just like that is one of these little moments in movies that just take my breath away. You know, it's like beyond words. You can't write a sentence that says, and Lady Bird and her mother, they have this connection, and boom, they're the same person. Like that wouldn't work if you were to just write that down. But power of montage, baby.
My take is kind of an unfair one, which is that I feel like a social pariah because I don't like this movie as much as everyone else does. Like I watched it and I enjoyed it and I laughed and I cried in all the right moments. But then after it was over and I was talking to people about it and reading about it, everybody's like 5 stars on Letterboxd, best movie of the year, best reviewed movie of all time on Rotten Tomatoes, and I'm like, is it that good? I don't know if it's that good, but
even though I liked it, I don't necessarily think it's like that good either. I do like it a lot, though.
I do have one genuine criticism of it, though, which is that, I mean, the movie's been compared a lot to Edge of 17, which came out last year, and I want to live in a world where there can be many versions of, like, the adolescent girl high school story, right? I don't want to pit those movies against each other, so to speak.
I feel like we're about to.
But
I'm not gonna say anything.
But the one thing that I think Edge of 17 does better than Lady Bird is that it gives humanity to the characters that the protagonist doesn't like. Like in Lady Bird, there is a subplot involving her kind of falling in with the popular kids. And Edge of 17 is kind of about the main character's relationship to the popular kids because her brother is one of the popular kids. And she hates them and thinks they're very shallow and phony and awful and obnoxious. By the end of the movie, she kind of realizes they're just nice people. They're nicer than her. They're popular because people like them. And she's kind of an unlikable person. And in Lady Bird, I feel like those popular kid characters are just kind of mean and awful and shallow and dumb. And they are not granted the same level of empathy and humanity that the mom and the brother and the first boyfriend are. So I think that you might be exaggerating a little bit when you say the movie is just when people say this movie is kind of like eternally empathetic and it's all loving all the time. I don't think that's necessarily true.
Fair.
Rant over.
That poor Timothée Chalamet character.
It is interesting. I will say really quick.
He just wants to read the people's history of the United States and, be himself.
It is very interesting to me. I've seen multiple interviews now with Greta Gerwig where she expresses a lot of skepticism about phones and social media. And I'm like, this is curious then that the character in the film who expresses hesitance about cell phones is like the butt of the joke. Maybe Lady Bird... Maybe we were wrong this whole time, and Lady Bird is not. It's not a semi-autobiographical story about Lady Bird. Maybe Greta Gerwig sees herself more in Kyle.
No, she said that in an interview. She talked about how she was writing the script, and she talked about that people kind of believe that she's Lady Bird. She's like, yeah, I have some of those qualities, but then she talked about how she was writing the different characters, and she wrote Kyle's character, and when she brought stuff for Timothée Chalamet to read and learn about the character with, she realized that he was much more of her when she was that age rather than Lady Bird.
Zach, what is your number 3 movie of the year?
I related more to Kyle than Lady Bird.
My number 3 movie of the year came very early in the year, but it was during the Oscar fuss when Entertainment Weekly did an interview with Isabelle Huppert, and it was just it ranks so highly on this list because I've never seen somebody so disinterested yet so intent on giving a strong answer and a well thought out answer because you have Jess Cagle giving these just pedantic, simple questions of pretty much the equivalent of like, what's your favorite color? And Isabelle Huppert gives this, deeply well thought out, she'd be like, orange because I was wearing an orange sweater with the day that my mother came to me for the first time, and I had my period when I was wearing an orange dress, and she gave these like incredibly detailed responses to just these silly award season questions. I loved it. Isabelle Huppert's Entertainment Weekly Oscars interview. Number 2, Andrew.
Cemetery's number 2 movie of 2017, a movie that I'm surprised is this high on the list, and was not this high on my list, but I still think it's great. The Shape of Water by Guillermo del Toro. This is a Hollywood film by the Mexican director and kinda cinephile on Twitter, Guillermo del Toro, who has recently given us these fun genre romps in English, like Crimson Peak and Pacific Rim, and he's also given us some dark fairy tales in Spanish, like The Devil's Backbone and Pan's Labyrinth. And like a lot of cinephiles my age, Del Toro was a major entry point into the world of cinema, especially international cinema. Pan's Labyrinth was one of the first foreign films I ever saw, and it absolutely amazed me. And I don't mean that in like the colloquial way that people say amazing all the time. Like, it really kind of blew my mind when I saw Pan's Labyrinth. And since seeing that film, I've watched almost every Del Toro film, and I've enjoyed almost all of them. But I've kind of resigned myself into thinking that he's probably never going to make a film like Pan's Labyrinth again. But The Shape of Water is that film that I was worried Del Toro was never going to make. It is another bold fable movie. It is intense. It's fantastical. It really reckons with a dark part of history like Pan's Labyrinth does. It has this self-assured hand of somebody who loves his craft and also loves people. The story is about a mute woman played by Sally Hawkins. She works as a custodian in a government facility where a creature is being kept. It's basically the Gilman creature from the movie The Creature from the Black Lagoon. But instead of this becoming a horror film like that, this movie is a romance because Sally Hawkins falls in love with the monster. She feels this type of emotional connection with the monster. And the thing that begs to be said about this movie is how classical it is. There's been a lot of movies in recent memory that are kind of about classical cinema, that are odes to movie magic, as they say. You got La La Land, The Artist, Hugo. But unlike those movies, Shape of Water just is magical. This reminds me of the Peter Labuza quote that Nathan likes a lot. We need less movies about the magic of movies and more movies that are just magic. Shape of Water is that. It has this majestic, regal quality to it that really harkens back to the films of Powell and Pressburger, to reference some filmmakers we've talked a lot about on the podcast, as well as Douglas Sirk. The lighting and the sets, everything is very vivid and colorful, meticulously made. But the one thing that Del Toro does very smartly is that he doesn't just recreate the aesthetic of the 60s studios movies. He is setting his film in the 1960s, and he presents it to us as it actually was, rather than this glamorized, whitewashed portrait of the 60s that we get in those films that he's referencing. We have this beautiful, nostalgic American 1960s, but it's a place full of paranoia and bigotry and inequality and violence. So
sounds
this
like
is a movie
2017.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, true. There's some parallels being made there. But I think that it's reductive to say that Shape of Water is just like the movie we need right now or something like that, right? This is a movie that mostly has its roots in history. It's a movie that loves classic cinema, but it also acknowledges the system that created classic cinema was evil on this very fundamental level. But crucially, this movie is neither just like a cinephile jerk-off session or a piece of political propaganda. You don't watch the movie thinking about the parallels to today's society or just marveling at all the technical craftsmanship. You really get swept up in the emotions of it. And that was very much my experience. To again, like, out myself as a movie crier. I cried multiple times watching Shape of Water, and this is a movie about a woman falling in love with a fish monster. So the fact that it was able to kind of sweep me off my feet in that way, I think shows that it's a very powerful, moving piece of film. Nathan, you have not seen it, but Lydia and Zach, what are your thoughts?
Just to pick up on what you said about it being a piece of movie magic, I was just thinking about the movies that are on my top 5. You have like Your Name, Get Out, and Shape of Water, and they're all like genre films that are just like pure fun, but also really, really intelligent filmmaking if you want to go there. And the movies that I don't respond to are like Lady Bird or more. I just don't know how to describe it exactly.
Non-genre movies.
Just,
Good.
dramas.
Movies that want you to feel something.
Whoa.
Shape of Water wants you to feel things. You take that back.
I felt things, people. Reader, I felt
More
things.
like Guillermo del Toro. No, that's how I feel about him personally. Sorry.
Wow, that was very insightful film criticism you just did there, Nathan.
Wait, you go to Columbia?
No, I don't.
Zach, what are your thoughts on Shape of Water?
Oh. I'm recovering still.
This is a long podcast.
Yeah. I really like The Shape of Water. I think that it I think that you hit the nail on the head, that it has this magic to it that you don't see very often, and I think that it's much more structured than a lot of Del Toro's work recently. I think that he kind of gets off, like his stuff has always been interesting, but I don't think that necessarily it all comes together as well as you'd want it to. And I think that this one definitely is much more together than Pacific Rim or Crimson Peak, which are movies that I like, but I think that they definitely have their glaring faults, and this one does. But I agree that it has this magic and sweetness to it that keeps you compelled to really get swept away in the story. I listened to a podcast where Del Toro was talking with Baz Luhrmann about the movie, and he talked about kind of speech and how speech is used in this film, and how the two characters who struggle to speak at all, the Sally Hawkins character who's mute, and the Fishman character played by Doug Jones, who of course is a fishman so he can't talk, are able to communicate much better than the people who can easily communicate. The people who can talk and interact with each other in that way, they struggle to communicate and struggle to express themselves, while these two characters who are unable to speak are able to express and communicate and share their emotions much easier. And I think that that's something I'm excited to watch the movie again, because it's something that I want to look for more in the second time around. And I'd also like to shout out the excellent work by Richard Jenkins. I thought he just has just this wonderful side role in this film. Kind of comes out of nowhere as really one of the great characters in this movie.
And it's also almost become cliche for people to praise the supporting acting of Michael Shannon in various movies, but he is really good in The Shape of Water. This is maybe his best role that I've seen him in. I feel like I've seen a lot of Michael Shannon movies. So, yes, number 2, Shape of Water. Zach, what is your number 2?
My number 2 is another pretty recent one. This one appeared on a lot of people's lists. Probably not, though. And that is when a Roy Moore surrogate was on CNN and was talking with Jake Tapper, and he didn't realize that you can swear yourself in using any religious text. It doesn't have to be the Bible, or
any legal text.
Yeah, and so when Jake Tapper told him that, I've never seen
actual slack jawedness.
I've never seen somebody process and try to process something so physically on their face than when he had to process that, because he was,
as a teacher, I have seen this face. I recognize this face.
Yeah, but they weren't on national television, I guess, when they were
This
doing
is true.
And
they weren't wearing a suit and tie and a grown man on national television.
Yeah, so that's number 2 right there.
Yes. And we talk so much about how comedy isn't visual enough. And this is such visual comedy, right? We couldn't just play the clip on this episode and you get the joke. You have to watch it. It's cinema.
It is cinema. All right. We have come to the end of our list, our number one film of the year, according to Cinematary. And that film is Good Time, the latest from Benny and Josh Safdie. The script comes from Ronald Bronstein and Josh Safdie, and it stars Robert Pattinson as well as Benny Safdie and Jennifer Jason Leigh. Robert Pattinson plays a bank robber who robs the bank with his brother, played by Benny Safdie, who is mentally challenged, and when they are running away from the bank robbery, of course it kind of goes awry. A dye pack goes off and they're running, and the police start chasing them, and Robert Pattinson's character gets away, but the Benny Safdie character is captured by the police and is sent to Rikers Island, and while there gets into a fight and is put into a hospital. And so Robert Pattinson's character is trying to get enough money to get him out and get him out of jail and get him back, but he has to come up with the money over the course of a night. I know this is one that we've talked about a number of times on the podcast already, but I'm curious to hear from everybody why they think that this is deserving, in their opinion, or maybe not deserving, of being the number one film of the year according to our list.
I don't think anybody has any major complaints about this one. I mean,
Well, I guess it's more like you're just like
poorly titled.
It was a bad time.
I think it's more just. I think it's more like, I thought this was fine, but like maybe it goes back to the ranking of putting it as the number one film, I guess. But go ahead.
Well,
I mean, we all had it in our top 10,
it was my number
right?
2, like, if you want to get pedantic or whatever, movies, the best movie.
Yes, if you don't count Twin Peaks, it is my number one film of the year. It's Lydia's number one film of the year. There were a lot of people who put Good Time as their number one, and for good reason.
I was
Lydia,
just
were you about to
thinking,
say?
I talked a lot about the filmmaking when I talked about it way early in the year when we did on the podcast, but I guess the reason it stuck with me as one of the best films of the year is it is so exciting and propulsive, and it looks so good, and all the performances are good. And also, Nate, you said on Twitter, Andrew, a few weeks ago when talking about 3 Billboards, and I'm tired of being asked to identify with disgusting, awful protagonists. And Good Time doesn't ask me to identify with Robert Pattinson, but it's still engaging and fun. There's a way to write these characters that and make you actually care about whatever they're doing, but you don't have. It's not being cheap with it or taking shortcuts. So it's also
it lives in his subjective experience the entire time. You kind of can't see beyond the periphery of his line of vision, but it does not ask you to sympathize with him. It just asks you to experience the tumultuousness of this night with him. It is so gripping and so thrilling and terrifying. It's not a horror movie. It's not an action movie.
It's a horror movie.
but it's all. Yeah,
it's a little bit of an action movie.
Right? This is not a dialogue movie, right? It's just people making decisions and doing things, and you watching them do them, and it moves at a mile a minute. And like I said when I talked about it originally on the podcast, it has this very dense conflict per minute rate. Every moment exponentially increases the stakes of the movie in a way that I don't know how they're able to pull off. But you just are continually more and more concerned about what is happening in this movie from the jump to the very, very end. And it's also an incredibly moving, emotional movie by the end. It takes a toll on you, but in the best way. Somebody was about to say something, and I cut them off. Sorry.
I think it was Nathan.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I would really like to give a shout out to a person who I think gets overlooked in the conversation about this movie and the Safdies in general is their co-writer and co-editor, Ronald Bronstein, who some folks might know as the director of the unfortunately underseen, for a number of reasons, movie Frownland. And if you ever get a chance to see that movie, I highly recommend it. It's kind of has a weird situation where it doesn't get shown a lot because Bronstein insists on projecting it himself. But that movie has this similar, like, very uncomfortable and frenetic energy to it, and I think that he is a very important player in the development of their style. And I think that is, I don't know, that's just like that energy is something that I just really like about them, because there is this sort of quality to their movies where I guess you could say it's like kind of a documentary thing where there are these quote unquote real people or street casted people or non-professional actors, or there are these places that they have learned about and know about in a very real way, but it also, like, it isn't following some kind of like realist agenda. It is in this fantastical world. Like, I think Lydia, you or Andrew, one of you said that it is this sort of subjective experience. Like, it is Connie is doing a lot of bad things, but he is kind of in this perpetual nervous, paranoid high, and the movie's sort of visual and qualities reflect that, and also the amazing soundtrack by One-Tricks Point Never really captures that too.
Right. Like, you are correct to point out, like, to shout out the editor as well as to shout out the composer, because there's so many collaborators here who are all bringing their fucking
Sean Price Williams
to the
as well.
table. Like, Sean Price Williams, like, he is making so many very smart choices about, like, how close to put the camera to Robert Pattinson and how to light the scenes with, like, various pieces of natural and artificial light, like television screens and cell phone screens and police sirens and traffic stop lights and things like that, to really make New York City feel like this, like, mythic, fantastical world, but also to put you deeply into the consciousness of this character. And also, like, Lydia, you made a good point when we talked about this way back, that, like, they're doing something with the aspect ratio, or like cutting the frame in half to make it super grainy and like in your face,
like actually shooting
right?
on film the half frame. So it's
only using half of the celluloid frame.
Like, all of the decisions are coming together, and I'm thinking about the way the lighting, like, ratchets up, and you finally get this descent into the carnival ride, and it's just fucking black lights. Oh my god,
yes.
It's like, what's happening?
So you have the amazing editing, you have the amazing directing, you have this incredible score from One-Tricks Point Never that is also the best electronic album of the year, and is always keeping time with Robert Pattinson's heart rate in a way. Like, it makes you more and more anxious as the movie goes along, and really makes the montage of the editing move together in this very fluid way. And then, of course, you have, like, Robert Pattinson as well as Buddy Duress in the supporting role, both of which I would call, like, the best actor and the best supporting actor of the year. So this movie is just, like, working 100% of the time as a genre film, as, like, this piece of aesthetic entertainment that is, like, gripping and exciting and entertaining. And then you can also have the conversation about the thematics and, like, what this movie is saying about, like, race and class and identity and money, and how that relates to today's climate. So there's a bit of, like, relevance there.
And very much about how people get, like, lost in the system.
Yes,
too. About, like, systemic structures of control. You have the police system of control. You have, like, the mental health system, as well as, like, hospitals and prisons and things like that. This movie is about characters who are very driven, navigating those, like, bureaucracies in a way and exploiting them, and doing it in a way that is always, like, motivated by character and never feels like it's setting out with the intent of creating a political statement, but by just, like, following the logical progression of events, it kind of inevitably makes one. So, man, it's just so well done. It's so smart. It's so great.
Good Time.
I've just talked a lot, though. Anybody else have other thoughts about Good Time?
No, I think you hit all the points.
Zach, what's your number one?
My number one. Drum roll, please. It's my number one film of the year is Rihanna's Instagram feed. End of thing. Like, I don't need to like expand on why Rihanna's Instagram feed is the number one.
I will not qualify that.
Yeah, like that. Like that speaks for itself, and that's it. That's the list.
Yay!
2017. Well, I believe that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook.com at Facebook at Facebook.com/Cinematary, at Twitter at Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at Letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all the movies that we talked about in this episode. We're going to be kicking off another actor and actress series to begin the year like we did last year. Nathan, would you like to talk a little bit about who we're going to be doing the actor series on, since I know you were a champion to study more of his movies?
Yeah, we're going to be zeroing in on one of my recent favorites and one of the great, just overall, I think, artists of the 20th century, inside and outside of cinema, inside and outside of the United States, because he had a huge following in France. You know who I'm talking about. It's Jerry Lewis. The late, the great, the bellboy, the errand boy, the patsy, the nutty professor. One of the, as he described himself, the total filmmaker. I think really up there with Charlie Chaplin. There was nobody like Jerry Lewis, and I'm going to be taking all these folks on a trip down Lewis Lane.
Yeah.
It's.
Wow.
I have never seen any of his movies.
I hope we have a good time, because he's one of my favorites. So that's my introduction. That's my pitch.
And if we all hate him, it's your fault.
I really hope that doesn't happen. We'll see.
I don't think.
Well, we may just treat it like this list and just get really hostile about it really quickly.
Yeah, we'll just be the entire series dunking on movies that have nothing to do with Jerry Lewis.
All right, we're going to talk about artists and models, but first, Boyhood. Yeah, it's gonna be good, guys. It'll be wonderful. Jerry Lewis. The end. Yeah, no, we're gonna start with his 19.
Hey, ladies. Yeah, I just had to do a little Lewis, because you're gonna have to do some impressions during this series. It's gonna be required.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Wonderful. Well, we're going to be kicking it off with 1955's Artists and Models with Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. So, good stuff. All right.
Shirley MacLaine, too.
Shirley MacLaine as well. Until then, though, thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed 2017's movies. We will see you next week.